Hello, Assalamualaikum. I'm Nurul Ain Izzati binti Baharum.
Hi, my name is Asma Akila binti Muhammad Kamal Arifin.
I am Riraja binti Muhammad Yusof.
Today we would like to present our topic of money exchange currency, and we had choose France as our group project. So we hope you enjoy.
Okay, for the introduction is for the last 15 years, the major objective of the French monetary policy has been to achieve nominal convergence with Germany. To do so, the France BDF has aimed at stabilizing the French parity to the D-mark within the European exchange rate mechanism ERM. Next, we move to the problem statement. The model presented was to avoid two important shortcomings of the previous VAR literature on France's monetary policy. First, economists just ignored the EMS content of France's monetary policy. The second one is most economists impose a common structure on roughly the last 20 years. The intervention rate is assumed to be the instrument of monetary policy, while the market day-to-day rates account mainly for shock to the risk premium on the fronts. So for the objective is to assess the existence of a poorly France monetary policy in the period of the hard EMS. The second one is the approach used to build a model of French monetary policy, and the last one is VAR model used as the key variables of the transmission mechanism, such as exchange rate, long-term interest rate, and the money or credit aggregate. The research framework is to focus on survey structural VAR identification of monetary policy shocks in small open economies. Introduce the identification scheme for France monetary policy shocks and the estimation of the structural VAR simulation.
Allianz and Western examine the relation between foreign currency hedging and Tobin's Q. They conclude that hedging is associated with higher firm value. Gui and Cotteri question the validity of the Allianz and Western results by illustrating that the majority of firms using derivative would not gain economically significant cash flow benefits in the event of extreme movement in underlying market prices. According to Jean Anjorian, in a study of 119 US oil and gas producers, find no evidence that hedging has any significant positive effect on firm value. The analysis of identification of French monetary policy focuses on VAR models and the quest for exogenous monetary policy shocks, domestic monetary policy in the EMS, and based on the case of the France after 1987, because it is the date of profound changes in the macroeconomic background and operating procedures for French monetary policy. Structural VAR econometrics is the method employed. It is particularly suited to analyze macroeconomic policy shocks, as shown by its increasing use by monetary policy analysts. Since 1987, the variance of French inflation has been very weak. Inflation has not exceeded 3.5% in annual terms since then, and this despite a sustained growth period in the late 80s. The official EMS parity rate of the franc has not been realigned since 1987. In spite of the occurrence of several speculative attacks, the BDF defense of the franc appears exposed to have been effective. The major reform of French financial market took place in the mid-80s. It has changed profoundly the operating procedures of French monetary policy. The BDF operates with two interest rates, which constitute a spread within which the day-to-day rate, which balance supply and demand of liquidity, fluctuates. The share in the total amount lent by the BDF to the banks fluctuates around 80%, so the intervention rate probably impacts as much as the day rate on banks' liquidity. The summarization of a data given representing the entire sample of a population. It measures the central tendency and measure of variability, which are central tendency and dispersion or variations. Measure of central tendency consists of mean, minimum, and maximum. Meanwhile, measure of dispersion or variation is standard deviation.
Regression analysis R2 or coefficient of determinant shows that 0.849 or 84.90%. Approximately 84.90% of variance in currency is explained by the real effective exchange rate index, which is in 2010 equal to 100. Inflation, consumer interest payment, and gross value added at the prices. The significant p-value that is greater than the significance level indicates that there is insufficient evidence in the sample to conclude that a non-zero correlation exists. Based on the research, the results show that the hypothesis is not supported because p-value is greater than significant level 0.00. Therefore, the hypothesis failed to be rejected. The null hypothesis that there is no zero correlation. Changes in the independent variable are associated with the changes in the response at the population level. This variable is statistically significant and probably a worthwhile addition to your regression model. So now is the correlation. Pearson's correlation coefficient is represented by the Greek letter RHO, which is known as P for the population parameter and R for a sample statistic. This correlation coefficient is a single number that measures both the strength and the direction of the linear relationship between two continuous variables. Values can range from -1 to +1. Positive coefficient indicates that when the value of one variable increases, the value of another variable also tends to increase. An example of a positive correlation is a relationship between the currency and the real effective exchange rate index, which is in 2010 equal to 100. As the currency increases and the real effective exchange rate also increases. Negative coefficients represent cases when the value of one variable increases and the value of other variable tends to decrease. An example of a negative correlation is a relationship between the price and interest payment. As the currency increases, interest payment will decrease. And the next one is the effector impact the currency. The effector impact the currency is the effective exchange rate index, inflation, gross value added at the basic prices, and the interest payment. And as for the conclusion, in 1987, French monetary policy, which marked both the last realignment of the franc in the ERM and the completion of major reforms of the French financial system. In particular, these reforms deeply changed the operating procedures of French monetary policy. The Banque de France has given up the administrative control of the total credit for a more market-oriented policy. The day-to-day rate has become a market rate, which the central bank influences indirectly by setting the intervention rate and the Lombard rate. Finally, monetary policy shocks identified to deviations from this short-run reaction function do not account for substantial share of prices and industrial production fluctuations. So I hope you guys enjoy this presentation. Thank you.